Welcome back to Flick Favorites. I'm going to explain a comedy, drama film from 2004, titled, The Last Casino. Spoilers ahead. Enjoy the content. Wilson, the casino's security supervisor, notices a player who consistently succeeds at blackjack. Wilson nevertheless manages to capture the man's image despite his awareness that the man is purposefully shielding his face from the camera. Wilson later learns via a background check that the man is Barnes, a professor of mathematics at a nearby institution. When he learns that Professor Barnes has made money with his card-counting technique, he kicks him out of the casino and forbids him from returning. One of Professor Barnes' investors, pays him a visit and complains that the professor revealed his name. He is informed that his contract is being terminated and is urged to settle his debt as soon as possible, otherwise, he risked facing repercussions. Professor Barnes offers assembling a team of card counters to play in his place and generate income for or after failing to discover any other solution. Agrees to consider his suggestion, but he snaps his finger in response, explaining that it will help him remember his obligation. Barnes begins looking for suitable team members and chooses Scott, who succeeds on a test of memorization, George, who has learned difficult mathematical equations, and Elise, a server, who properly recalls Barnes' complex order at the restaurant. He extends an invitation to them to come inside his office, identifies himself, and explains that he is a card counter who employs calculations to forecast the winning cards. Barnes disagrees with George, who sees it as cheating, and thinks it's merely a skill that provides him an advantage over others. Barnes explains his strategy to them and asks them to join his squad. He explains card counting and demonstrates how to examine cards while communicating covertly with one another, but he also cautions against the dangers of doing so because casino cameras are always watching the players for anything out of the ordinary. The three of them go out to lunch after meeting with Barnes and debate whether or not to accompany him. Scott and George concur, and although Elise has some second thoughts, she also agrees since she needs the money to pay for her college education. The next day, when they see Barnes again, they decide to join, but not before Elise inquires about the cost. In addition to the three of them sharing the remaining money, Barnes claims he will receive a 50% part. He will be the one playing money for the bets, so they accept even if the divide appears wrong. Barnes mentions that he will be present at the casinos to monitor their revenue while he is outlining the rules. The crew ultimately begins working and Barnes begins teaching them the fundamentals of card counting when the technicalities have been worked out. Barnes invites them to see and informs him that he would be investing money for the games as they continue to practice. They present themselves and demonstrate their talents, and he agrees to compensate them. As they go, and Barnes go through the rules and agree to work together, although he will keep a 75% portion of Barnes' earnings. Barnes disagrees with this distribution, but he cannot object because he already owes him $40,000 for it. The crew is now debating because Elise does not trust the professor and Scott is unsatisfied with him and believes he is suspicious. Soon after, Barnes shows in and urges them to get started because agreed to invest money in their games. He argues that they cannot enter the casinos wearing their true identities since they must all maintain a facade. Scott accepts the offer to work as a salesperson, and George agrees to play the role of a wealthy child with lots of money to spend. Elise objects and challenges him when he proposes she walk in as an escort. Nevertheless, Barnes persuades her by stating that it would be the greatest cover for her as no one will pay much attention. Everyone changes into their character-appropriate attire, but Barnes is not happy with Elise's outfit. They take her shopping before the first game and ultimately get the desired appearance. Barnes brings them to the casino, where everyone idly begins to explore the space to get a feel for it. They become puzzled because it is their first game, but Barnes makes sure they follow the strategy and gives the all-clear to begin. George unwillingly gets up and starts playing the game when Elise signals the table number to him. Once more, he becomes disoriented and loses his bearings, but Elise intervenes to assist him while Scott engages in his own game. They assemble in a restaurant to report to Barnes after they leave. but he chastises them for messing it up. He claims he departed early because he was unable to even watch them play. Scott surprises him by saying they made a comeback and won $6,000 in the process. When Burns learns about their performances, he is overjoyed and offers them each $3,000. The first game turns out to be the start of their winning run, and they begin to make a lot of money wherever they go. The team gets together for a celebratory dinner where Scott buys drinks for everyone after they made a lot of money from their games. As a result, Elise counsels him to exercise greater financial restraint, but he does not heed her advice since he believes he will continue to generate money at the same rate. Scott displays his fancy automobile before their next game and claims he leased it from the bank. Barnes chastises him for squandering his money since he knows it won't be there for long. Since the debt can cause Scott to become distracted from the game, he encourages Scott to be extra watchful. One night, Elise is approached by a guy, who tells he used to be a cop, but is now after pro gamblers who win money through their tactics. He admits that, like every other casino owner, he attempts to outwit them since he does not want anyone to profit from him. She inquires as to whether he has located anyone, and he replies that Scott is being watched since he frequents the location and nearly always wins. The evening turns out to be unsuccessful, and they mess it up once more. The manager approaches George after becoming concerned about his extended winning run. He extends an invitation for him to visit them in their executive suite, but George shoos him away since he's taking his attention away from the game. Orr sees Barnes in the meanwhile and expresses his displeasure with the team's performance. Barnes attempts to persuade him to extend the contract, but he cancels it and demands that he pay his $100,000 due within a week. Barnes asks him to keep the team out of their agreement, and he complies because he just cares about getting his money back. Back at the casino, George informs Scott about the manager's invitation to dinner, which he accepted since he regarded him as the game's best player. Scott urges George to accept the invitation despite the fact that he looks a bit hesitant about the offer. After the evening, Barnes phones them once more to inform them that Orr has chosen to break the deal. He claims that in order to repay Orr and end the consequences of the deal, they must raise $500,000. They start to worry and argue because they realize they won't be able to come up with this much money so quickly, but Barnes cautions them about Orr and advises them not to oppose him. They begin to think about money once the professor has left, but they are unable to come up with a plan to earn $500,000 in 1 week. They discover that they have a combined total of $145,000, which they must utilize to reach $500,000, while debating the matter. They choose to wager the funds on more games in an effort to maximize their winnings. The security squad notices they are operating as a team as they enter a different casino for the subsequent game. When the authorities come, Scott and George are taken away for a discussion while Elise is able to flee. Scott is aware that they cannot do it since it is against the rules, but the manager threatens to keep them away from the game and says he will take Scott's chips during the inquiry. After being warned not to return to the casino, they are freed since they cannot be kept in custody. George expresses his worries about being discovered once more when they return, but Scott reassures him that no one is aware of their true identities. Elise advises traveling to Ottawa because they are prohibited from the city's casinos and yet need money. When she gets there, she checks the cash and discovers that Scott has once again misplaced $20,000. She challenges him for making life difficult for the team, but he promises to make things right. While Elise phones Professor Barnes to ask for some emergency cash, he declines, claiming he has none, and George returns to another location to try his luck. Scott returns to the hotel later, but George is having difficulties in the casino because of a disagreement with the manager. He is saved by Scott and Elise, and Scott informs them of a private party and proposes they attend to play more games there. Due to their lack of other options, George and Elise reluctantly accept his proposal. After passing through the security check when they get at the game, they are able to enter. Elise immediately realizes after analyzing the cards that they have little chance of succeeding, but Scott insisted on attempting. They begin to play and have a few significant victories, then Elise discovers that the manager has tampered with the deck. They refuse to count the cards in front of everyone as she insists, which prevents them from continuing to play. A second Chinese man at the table adds that he would also want to hear the tale. If they tamper with the cards or refuse to let them out, George explains that he is threatening to employ his armed men against them. The management ultimately lets them leave with the money they earned after failing to locate an alternative. When the man admits he is merely a salesperson and did not say any of the things George translated after they leave the party, George admits he deceived the management into letting them go. George recommends they try another city as they celebrate their success, but Elise argues they should return and tell Barnes it's the best they can do, and Scott agrees. They take Orr along when they meet Barnes to make the repayment in order to prevent Barnes from stealing from them. Barnes tries to count the money and appears disturbed by their choice, but they deliver it to Orr and explain that they could only get to $300,000. Barnes lied about the size of the loan, but it's too late now. To their amazement, Orr says nothing and cheerfully departs with the money. Scott bids George and Elise farewell before departing for Vegas. Elise returns to the school where she meets another card player after George gives her the money and asks her to pay her tuition. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to stay updated on future videos. Leave a like to support the channel.